Hey, John here, and this is the Fuji X20. In fact, this is my Fuji X20, which is why you see some extra accessories on it. There are 4 extra accessories. The bottom half of this leather case, which is the third-party case, this self-opening lens cap. I also have a thumb grip right here and a brass shutter button. Now, I'll put links in the description below for all these things so that you can get them for your own X20 if you want. But in this video, I'm actually going to talk about just the basic buttons and functions of this camera and point out what everything does. So the on switch is actually the lens right here. And the way it works is you twist it on to the 28 mark, and then these are actually 28 through 112. It's a physical zoom that you do yourself, so it's not electronic, which I like. And that is actually equivalent 35mm focal lengths on there, which is also very nice, very photographer oriented. Next, on the mode dial here, you of course have your regular MASP. That's going to be manual, aperture priority, shutter priority, and program. So in shutter priority, you choose shutter speed, camera chooses aperture. Aperture priority, you choose aperture, camera chooses shutter speed, and in manual you choose both. In program, it's just like automatic, except you can override a lot more than you can in the regular automatic mode. The regular automatic mode is 2 clicks down right here. All that does is try and get the right picture, like the right amount of light. The more advanced automatic mode is the SR Plus mode. That's the mode you really want to use if you're just you don't really know much about photography, but you want nice photos. This is where the camera chooses between all the presets that are already programmed into it, based on the scene that it sees. This advanced mode here, this is actually a filter mode, as well as multiple effects. So you can do things like miniature, toy camera, pop color, panorama, and also, bokeh, they call it pro focus, but blurred out background, multi-exposure, things like that. The next one is it's the preset mode, but they have a strange name for it. They call it scene position, and you go into the menu here, and you can choose between portrait, landscape, sports, night, fireworks, sunset, snow, all that stuff. The enhanced portrait enhancer is pretty nice because it smooths out people's skin. And I use that one actually a lot when I'm being lazy, but it actually works real well. After that is the movie mode, which in the movie mode it's a pretty nice little mode. When you push the Q button here, which is your shortcut button for settings, you can actually see that this can do up to 250 frames per second in a high speed mode, which is pretty cool. It's a tiny little video. It looks really cool on this little screen, but it looks awful on a big computer screen. But it's still kind of fun to play around with. After that is the custom modes, C1 and C2, where you set the camera the way you want, and then you can go into the menu and save it as one of those presets there. Your own custom preset, which is pretty cool. Over here is the exposure compensation dial. This is used in automatic and semi-automatic modes to basically make the pictures brighter or darker without really having to mess with any other settings. So that's a pretty nice thing to have. Next to it is the custom function button right here. Normally I have this set to ISO, so it's just quick and easy to access, but you can actually set this button for quite a few different options. On the back here I have the hot shoe for the camera, where I have my thumb grip here put in. That's where an external flash would go. The built-in flash is right here. The switch for it pops it up, and it doesn't go on until you pop it up, and of course you can just push it back down. Here is the rangefinder. A rangefinder is different from a viewfinder. If you look on the front here, you can see that the rangefinder and the lens are actually separate from each other. So when you look into this, you're not seeing what the camera actually sees. You're seeing something very close. And it has about 85% coverage, I think, on this camera. You have your diopter wheel here to adjust it for your vision. If your vision is not very good, and you can try and adjust it without glasses. And then on the other side is the eye sensor. So when you put your eye up to it, it turns off the screen. You can see it works right there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put the camera in manual mode now, so I have access to the most features. The 2 dials that you're going to use the most are actually right here. These are your control dials. So you can see right now in manual mode I'm changing my aperture with this dial, and then this one changes my shutter speed as I spin it around here. In manual mode, on the left-hand side you have your light meter and shutter speed and aperture on the bottom here, with ISO on the right. If I push my custom function button, which is currently set to ISO, I can just change the ISO real quickly, which is pretty nice. The next buttons that you're going to use most often are going to be the center button here, the menu OK button, the display / go back button, and then the Q button, which is a quick button, I believe is what it stands for. But it's just a way to get to all the settings of the camera very quickly and be able to change them. So you can just highlight something like noise reduction and just spin the wheel and change the setting. You can also access things like ISO, or whether to shoot RAW or JPEG or RAW plus JPEG. Also film simulation, sharpness, color, shadow tone, highlight tone. This is detail in light areas, detail in dark areas. This is saturation, this is sharpness. This is simulating different Fuji films. They have Provia, Velvia, and Astia programmed into this camera. LCD brightness, image stabilization mode, autofocus mode, and then the self timer, 10 seconds or 2 seconds. And then you can push the back button to get out of there. Another way to get back to the shooting mode is just to quickly tap the shutter button. Whether you're in the menu or the quick mode, just tapping the shutter button will work just fine. So pushing this middle button here accesses the main menu, and then you can do more advanced settings. You can see face detection is included in the camera, which is really nice. It has focus peaking located right there. All these different settings, and you have to go to the left and then down to the little wrenches that are blue in order to get into the setup menu. Otherwise it won't let you go down. You have to go to the left, go down, and then back to the right. A little weird, but whatever. Now the other buttons on the back of the camera here, this is your play button, this green one right here. You push this to access the photos and videos you've already taken. Below that is the automatic exposure button. Actually, that's a metering button. You use that to change whether it does spot metering, average metering, things like that. And then in picture review mode, it's used to zoom in. Next is the bracketing button to choose whether you're shooting a single photo or you're shooting multiple photos at once. And that's also the zoom out button when you're viewing photos. And then below that is the white balance button, where you tell the camera what white balance to do. I usually keep it on automatic because it does a pretty decent job, but you can also do custom white balance. On the right hand side here, you'll see your auto exposure lock / auto focus lock button, and you can actually customize that a little bit as to exactly what it does and how it works. But that's for locking the exposure and the focus, and or when you're taking a picture. And there's a couple different situations where you might want to do that. Below that, you'll have your autofocus selection. That's the button you push to, say, choose an autofocus point if you're working on a single autofocus option. On the left here is the macro mode. You can choose between regular macro and super up close macro that does up to 1 centimeter, which works really, really well actually. Next to that, to the right, is the flash mode, which my flash hasn't popped up, so it's not letting me do it. Below that is just a quick timer mode, 10 or 2 seconds. So you just have some more shortcut buttons, some easier ways to access these things. Now if I take off the bottom leather case here, you'll be able to see the ports on the side, which are a USB and a micro or mini HDMI. I can't remember which one that is, but that's for connecting it to a television set. And those cables aren't very expensive. And so you can turn it off that way, and the battery compartment is under here. You can see this is where your SD card goes, and then where your battery goes. Under here you can also see the tripod mount, which is reinforced, and it's also a little offset. And then finally on the front of the camera you have your autofocus modes, some more autofocus modes. You have autofocus single, which is where it will focus once, lock, and stay there until you release it. Autofocus continuous, which is where it will lock an autofocus, but it may change if the camera believes that there's a subject moving. It might try and refocus itself. And then manual focus, which with the focus peaking, it's quite nice. When you're on manual focus, you actually use this wheel here in order to change the focus during the exposure. On the front here, you can also see microphones, stereo microphones, and then the autofocus assist light. And then finally, you also see here on the bottom, you have a speaker. And then if you, in the battery compartment, there's this kind of weird thing that comes out here. This is actually for when you use the wall converter, to where you put an adapter in here, and you close this, and the wire comes out here and then plugs into the wall, so the camera can run off wall power. That's what that is, and that's why that's there. So I hope that my little brief tutorial about this camera was helpful. If you want details about, more specifically about how to do things in this camera, I have a whole other series of videos about specific subjects, so you can just go to the subject you want. And if there's anything that I don't have, just let me know and I'll do my best to get you that information.